Hello, and welcome back to the Alpha Male Podcast. The podcast where we don't apologize for being men, strong, dominant, and in control. The way we were made, in the image and likeness of God, our Creator. And we don't apologize for it. We get together in this podcasting tribe, if you will. Today's episode is going to be entitled, What's Freedom Worth? Going to put in the bio and then roll into the topic. If you've listened to the bio before, you just don't care, you can skip to about 3.5, 4 minutes in. Should get you pretty close to the subject for today. Before we roll into that, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Leave a review of the podcast if you've listened to it before. Your one-stop shop to find out more, to see pictures, to contact me, to support anything like that is goodshepherdtraining.com. All one word, goodshepherdtraining.com. With that, the bio and then the topic, guys. Who's the guy talking to you through the microphone? First and foremost, I am a Christian. I make no apologies for that. God is number one, and I want to honor that and honor Him. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States. I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. After my combat tours in Iraq, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps, teaching urban warfare and desert warfare to Marines and other military forces. After that, I worked for LAPD as a sworn peace officer. I worked regular patrol assignments, more specialized assignments in law enforcement, was in that for a lot of years. I also served the United States Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I guess I should say that my primary MOSs in both were infantry. I started shooting competition even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. In fact, by God's grace, with the talents He's given, even won a gold medal before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I've won more competition shooting matches than I can honestly remember. State rifle and pistol champion a few times over. West Coast regional rifle champion. I've been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency that I won't specify. I've also been blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area where our primary objective, our job, was to stop active shooters. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. I've hunted all over this beautiful country, from mule deer on the west coast to whitetail on the east coast to gray squirrel on the east coast to prairie dogs on the west coast. I have been a professional hunter and guide of all kinds of game, professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk and deer and exotic species. I have slain wolf and bear and all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for it. FBI certified, NRA certified, firearms instructor, professional firearms instructor for a lot of years. But if you ask me what I am, I'd say first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a student of the Bible, a teacher, a preacher, and a fisher of men. With that, let's talk about freedom and what freedom's worth. Now, I don't think I have to tell anyone listening that this world is a far different place than it was just a few short years ago. And I'm not going to tell you what to think or what to believe. Ask yourself if you think this world is better than it was, better off than it was, more free than it was a few years ago. Now, I don't want you to just take what I say as truth. I want you to test what I say. As an alpha male, you shouldn't just believe what somebody else tells you, unless that someone is God, and that's not me. But consider for yourselves, reckon for yourselves as a man, the knowledge and logic and truth God's put in you. Do you think this world is more free or less free than it was a few years ago? Do you think that is better or worse? Honestly, think about that for yourself. Just those simple questions. Now let me start by saying I don't consider myself free. I gave up that. I am a servant of God. I am a servant of Jesus Christ. I was bought with a price. I don't do what I want to do. Hopefully I do what God wants me to do. I don't consider myself free. I consider myself a servant of God. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the freedom of a society, the freedom of individual rights and individual liberties. And I'm not pretending to have all the answers. In fact, I'll tell you, I don't have the answer to this question. I have wondered and prayed and contemplated it. So I'm going to submit to you this. The Bible, God, He says to submit to governing authorities. And if God says it, I want to do it. Here's what I wrestle with that is that when I served in both branches of the armed forces, I take an oath. If you take an oath to uphold a constitution, which I believe all the politicians in the United States take an oath to the Constitution, if they are disobeying, and I'm not saying they are, I'm saying if they disobey their oath and their governing authority, do you then obey the Constitution, the governing authority that they're supposed to obey, or do you obey what they're saying? Now, in a good government, there shouldn't be that kind of contradiction. But I don't think anybody listening to this is stupid. So think about it for yourselves. And think about that. I'm not giving you the answer to that. Unless I know a definitive answer from God, then I'm not going to tell you to do something or not do something. I'm telling you that's what I've wrestled with. And I still don't have a clear-cut answer to that. You reckon that for yourself as a man. And I hope by God's grace to be a man of my word and to fulfill the things that come out of my mouth. I wish that every man was like that. Then I don't know that we'd be in this predicament where we have a constitution and men that are elected and appointed to uphold said constitution and may or may not do so. So that's a quandary we find ourselves in. I say that to say that certain freedoms are guaranteed, or are supposed to be guaranteed, rather, by our Constitution. Do you consider the person the governing authority of the United States government? Or do you consider the document written that they take an oath to be the governing thing? Again, I'm not telling you the answer. You must reckon that for yourself as a man, as an alpha male. You don't just blindly follow. That's what beta males do. This is the Alpha Male podcast. You figure that out for yourself. Now, obviously, if you're listening to this, you've lived through the pandemic thus far by God's grace. Very thankful for that. I have had COVID. My wife has had COVID. I'm not saying that COVID is not a real thing. I think that COVID is a real thing. I'm not in denial. I know that COVID exists. I had COVID. I tested positive for COVID. I felt bad for a couple of days. COVID is a real thing. I'm not denying that COVID is a real thing. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist or that it's all made up. I'm not even saying that there's no danger to COVID. I believe that there is a danger. I believe that COVID does pose a danger, especially to, the elderly, people with, certain medical conditions, asthma, things like that, obesity. I believe that it does pose a risk for those people, a significant risk. I'm not denying that. But I don't want us to get so myopic, so focused on one threat that we forget another. What is the threat of losing freedom? and losing personal freedom to losing rights like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? What is the cost of losing personal freedom? There is a threat from COVID, but is there not also a threat from losing freedom? And what is the cost of freedom, and what is the price of freedom? I'm not saying you should or should not wear a mask. If you want to wear a mask, I think you should wear a mask. I'm not against wearing masks. I'm not even an anti-vaxxer. I'm not anti-modern medicine. I think if you believe that you're at high risk for dying of COVID, and you believe that the risk of the vaccine and all medical treatments, all things that you shove into your body have consequences. And if you reckon yourself as a grown man that the consequences of COVID are greater than the consequences of getting the vaccine, I think you should do what you think is right. And I don't think anybody should be able to stop you from getting a vaccine. I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm anti-forcing people or shaming people into doing something they don't believe is right in their own hearts, especially a grown man. It's one thing if you are the sovereign over your child and you make them do something because they don't have the wisdom yet. But as a grown man, I'm against somebody forcing you to put something else. I'm against forcing another man to do something he doesn't believe is right, and that I have no moral justification for knowing that is right. I do believe that there is absolute truth. I do believe that some things are absolutely true and unarguable about. For instance, adultery is wrong. I don't care how you try and justify it. Adultery is wrong. Doesn't matter if the people are separated. Doesn't matter if this. Doesn't matter if that. You shall not commit adultery is pretty clear. It's as clear as the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, I consider, you shall not commit adultery an even more absolute truth because it comes straight from God. You shall not. Some things are an absolute truth. But if there's no guidance from above, I personally am against forcing somebody else to do something that you can't show as either right or wrong just because you want somebody to perform a certain way. I'm not saying that there's no risk from COVID. I'm saying that there is a risk of losing freedom. Now, I don't know the number of people that have died from COVID. I don't know that anybody could actually know that number. But whatever you believe that number is, it's certainly not zero. I'm not saying there's no risk. And I don't know anybody that could give an accurate list of numbers or names other than God himself that would know this. But I looked up a quick web search. How many people died from government genocide in the 20th century? First thing that popped up, probably pretty unbiased, hawaii.edu. Let's take a look. The number they came up with for 20th century democide is something like 169 million and some odd change of human lives taken. Now, of course, we don't know these numbers for sure, but I looked up that same thing I looked up, and there's a list on Wikipedia of numbers of genocides. The Holocaust estimate between 5 million and 6 million. The Soviet Union during the 20th century between 2 million and 7 million. North Korea, 60,000 to 70,000. Somalia, 50,000 to 200,000. Iraq, 50,000 to 180,000. Myanmar, which you might know of as Burma, 9,000 to 43,000. Now, I skipped over a lot of the listings in there. I gave some of the ones I thought you might recognize or know about, or the ones that maybe just I knew about. Now reason with yourself as a man what the threat of losing personal freedom and personal rights are. I would submit that for a government, a ruling power, a ruling authority to kill its own citizens when they've committed or have not been convicted of any crime deserving of death, to kill people in that number and that magnitude repeatedly throughout history, because those citizens had a great abundance of personal freedom and liberty and power, or because it was taken away. So I'd submit the question again, and you must answer for yourselves. What is the cost, or what is the price of freedom? I'm not trying to make this political party. I think this is so much bigger and more important than that. Generally, when people try and talk politics with me, I answer them this way. I put my faith in God, not government. Whatever happens, whatever way the political winds blow, by God's grace, my life is built on something firmer, something steadier, something better, a rock, the rock of my salvation, Jesus Christ. And I don't want to tell you what to do or what not to do if I have no clear direction from the Father. I'm just doing this so you'll think and consider. I think it's so important today when we are bombarded with so much information. And I must say that if you haven't heard this before, I got rid of my television years ago. And by God's grace, I found a wife who also got rid of a television before she met me. Neither one of us has a television or watches, programming. I would not want to be programmed by any third party other than God. But with an era where we're bombarded with so much information, with people telling you what to think, either one side or the other, I would consider, as an alpha male, reckoning for yourself what the cost and price of things are, and what the priority of things are, and what's really important in life. To watch and be ready, as God tells us, as the Bible tells us. I don't know what you should do or shouldn't do in regards to government. I don't have that answer. But what I do know is that God, Jesus Christ, He tells us to watch and be ready. Are you watching? Are you ready? I know that you should be doing that. That much I will say for a certainty. Watch and be ready. Be a good servant. Whatever hour of the watch Jesus returns in, watch and be ready. Be strong and prove yourself a man. With that, I want to say thanks for listening to the Alpha Male Podcast. I know this was a heavy topic. I know this was a heavy thing. Obviously, anytime you talk about genocide or democide or things like that, it's a heavy topic. And we've done a few lighter episodes recently. The last one we did was on puppies and dogs. But I don't just want to tell you what you want to hear. I hope to tell you what I think what's important and what needs to be heard. If you like this podcast, if you're into guns and gunfighting and stuff like that, you may also like Gunfighter Life. For my bio, you may have surmised that I've been blessed with quite the talent for guns and gunfighting. So you can check out Gunfighter Life if that interests you. If you care about the really important stuff, you may also like Simple Man Sermons, the preachings of a simple man called by God to share the good news of Jesus Christ. You can check those out probably on whatever platform you're listening to this on. If you want to check out more, you can go to goodshepherdtraining.com. Goodshepherdtraining.com is the website. It's got those podcasts listed on there. It's also got some more visual stuff if you want to see pictures of things on there if you're a more visual person. If you want to support the podcast, because this podcast is free to listen to and I like it that way. But sadly, it's not free to produce. I've been very blessed by God with an income and very blessed by generous supporters to be able to keep this podcast going and get better, hopefully, in your eyes. I used to just, for years, just talk into an iPhone and upload it. No editing, no software recording, no sound altering or anything like that. You might hear a bunch of clicks. You might hear long pauses. Sometimes I may just lose an entire episode. But by the blessings of God, through the generosity of others, podcasts have become more frequent and hopefully better in quality and also in quantity. So if you want to support, consider going to goodshepherdtraining.com, scrolling down to the Patreon page for as little as $1, a fraction of the cost of most of your fancy city cups of coffee. You could support the podcast. And if you don't want to do that, don't feel guilty about it. My God supplies all my needs. If you want to support in a non-monetary way, consider liking, subscribing, and commenting, leaving a review of the podcast on whatever platform it is. If you listen for any length of time, you'll know on full-length episodes I'll generally throw out a tactical tip. Please call them tactical tips. This one is more of a, alpha male life advice. But if you want to be an alpha male, I consider not going along with things because that's the way they've always been or because that's what somebody else tells you. Consider, why is this thing this way? Is it right? Is it true? Is it in line with what the Word of God says? That should be your litmus test for the way something should be, not just the way that it is. There's a time to, go along and get along. If I'm going to somebody else's house and their thing is they take off their shoes, that's their house. I got no more problem with taking my shoes off when I go in their house. If it's something more substantial that affects your relationship with God or with others, look at that way. Why is this thing the way that it is? Is it right? Is it wrong on its face? Consider malum prohibitum and malum in se. Is this thing wrong because somebody says it's wrong, or is it wrong by its very nature? Is it evil by its very nature? Don't just take something for something without questioning it. Question, why are things the way that they are? Should they be that way? Even if there's nothing that you might be able to do about it, except for maybe change it in your own life. As an alpha male, I think it's good to reckon and consider and be circumspect about those kind of things. With that, I'm going to say, men, have a blessed day.